Hello again. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well as we continue social distancing and quarantine. Got the next part of our quarantine story time here from David Maraniss, the book When Pride Still Mattered, A Life of Vince Lombardi. Where we last left off, Vince finally started coaching. It's his first coaching job that he has ever had, and we're well into the biography here. He winds up coaching with the Saints, which is a Catholic high school in New Jersey, after kind of flailing around not knowing what to do the previous couple of years following his graduation from Fordham University. We begin. Lombardi ended up staying at Saints for 8 years. It was there, in the insular world of North Jersey schoolboy competition, that he developed many of the pedagogical skills that later allowed him to stand apart from the coaching multitudes. Year by year, as his reputation grew beyond Englewood, it became clearer to him that coaching was his life's calling. Football coach was not what Harry and Maddie had expected of their son, nor what his old classmates had predicted. In some ways, it was a job below his own self-image, all of which worked in his favor. During his years in Englewood, Lombardi was driven by a contradiction, consumed by a sport, and somewhat embarrassed that it was considered merely a game. This had two consequences. It intensified his will to win, made it overpowering in him, while simultaneously pushing him to infuse football with something more serious, to find a deeper meaning in the work and play juxtaposition tattooed above his father's knuckles. In that mission, he had much the same visionary motivation that philosopher Miguel de Unamuno, butchered that one, I knew it was coming too, Miguel de Unamuno, better, in a luminous phrase, ascribed it to Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Jesuits and other Catholic mystics, the perception of, quote, an intolerable disparity between the hugeness of their desire and the smallness of reality. When he took the job at Saints, Lombardi said later his frame of mind was that he, quote, wanted to be a teacher more than a coach, and he enrolled in courses at nearby Seton Hall to sharpen his classroom instruction. With a steady job in hand, he also felt secure enough to propose to Marie Planitz, his girlfriend, and she accepted his engagement ring. His assignments at Saints left him with little free time and no spending money. He was Palau's top assistant, coaching the line during football season, head coach of the varsity basketball team, and member of the faculty, teaching physics, chemistry, and Latin. For all that, Saints started his pay at $1,700 a year. The salary was paltry, but not impossible to live on. On weekends, there were always Maddie's home cooking in Brooklyn or dinner with Marie. And housing in Englewood cost next to nothing. He and Palau started out sharing a boarding house room across the street from the church. The rent was $1.50 each per week for the cramped quarters. Quote, I hate to say this, but we slept in the same damn bed. Do that today. Holy Jesus, Palau would say decades later. Quote, a big king-size bed. We never had any trouble, really. We were so tired, slept right through. The Saints lost the first 2 games of the 1939 football season, yet Palau and Lombardi emerged with positive reviews from the local press and intimations of better things to come based on the way their squad competed against heavily favored Ridgefield Park and St. Benedict's of Newark, who outweighed the Saints by 15 pounds per man. The Lombardi-coached line impressed observers more than Palau's offense, which was based on the old Notre Dame box that he had learned from sleepy Jim Crowley, his former coach at Fordham. The two Fordham teammates developed a rivalry, even as they worked together compatibly and slept in the same boarding house bed. They competed intensely in chess matches before school, in the morning and during class breaks, huddled in the corner of the locker room. At night, after dinner, they gathered empty beer cans until they had enough to field 2 teams, then arrayed the cans on the table, which served as a playing field, and tried to outsmart each other with new formations. Before the 3rd game against Tenafly, Palau asked Lombardi to give the team a pep talk, and when it was over, realized that his assistant had a fire inside that he could not match. Quote, I knew he was intense about the game, and I knew he got excited, Palau said later. But that pep talk was incredible. I had never seen anything like it before. I was shaking in my boots when it was over, and I know the team was too. Eyes bulging, eyelids blinking, fists clenched, Lombardi finished his speech, approached the starters one by one, said that they had done nothing to impress him during practice that week, and demanded more. "What are you going to do today?" he thundered. The Saints scored twice in the first period, then held firm the rest of the game for a 13-0 win. They did not lose again that season, which ended with the Saints establishing themselves as the new power in town with a 20-0 victory over crosstown rival Englewood Dwight Morrow on Thanksgiving Day. What worried Lombardi most was the daunting task of coaching basketball. He was absorbed by football strategy and thought he understood it, but basketball was alien to him, even though he had played on the Cathedral prep team. Palau, a three-sport star who had captained the Fordham basketball squad, offered to help the first half of the season. He would teach Vince the zone defense, which was simple, he said. After football practice during the week, after games on weekends, they engaged in their basketball tutorials. Handy Andy could see that Vince had no feel for the game, but nonetheless was astute at picking up strategy and simplifying everything on court. After only 5 games, he decided to leave Lombardi on his own. Quote, "I could see he was doing as good a job as I could have done. He had a brain." In his first experience as head coach in any sport, Lombardi led the Saints to a winning season, though barely, at 10 wins and 9 losses. It took the players some time to adjust to him. Their previous coach had been an easy rider, in the words of Mickey Corcoran, the team's star player, and when Lombardi came in as a strict disciplinarian, quote, "the change was a bit of a culture shock." His emotions were never far from the surface. His eruptions became legendary. Of all the stories about his temper, the one that Saints basketball players most enjoyed telling in later years concerned the time he leapt from the bench in a rage, only to bang his head on a low-hanging steel girder in the Saints' cozy gym, a jolt that not only pained him but quieted him for the rest of the game. Red Garrity, the coach at rival Englewood Dwight Morrow, thought that it occurred in a game between the two schools when a referee made a crucial call against Saints. Corcoran had a different memory, believing that he inspired the head-banging when, as captain on the court, he chose to shoot foul shots instead of taking the ball out of bounds, defying Lombardi's instruction. Corcoran, loose and cocky, with the natural basketball instincts his coach lacked, was Lombardi's pet, the first in a long line, and as such, the most frequent witness to his mood swings. Before practice during the week, Lombardi enjoyed playing horse with Corcoran, Fred Schoenfelder, and Johnny Moon. "Match my shot. Make this one." The outcome was usually the same. The boys outshot him, but Lombardi remembered the one-trick shot he threw in and boasted about it for days. After practice on Tuesdays, he occasionally invited the boys over to his room to play hearts. If he stuck one with the Queen of Spades, he, quote, "went hilarious," with his big teeth flashing an irrepressible grin. On more than one Friday afternoon, he found Corcoran after school and told him, quote, "call your mom. We're going out to Brooklyn for some home cooking." All the way out to the Lombardi house, they talked basketball, different defenses, college plays Vince had seen that week at Madison Square Garden. Lombardi was warming to the role of coach. It was what he imagined being a priest might be like, he told friends. He could be a father figure and leader, and unlike the priesthood, the coaching profession did not force him to repress his emotions. If you wanted to blow off steam, you could bark at the kids and no one would be shocked. He made a point of challenging Corcoran the most as a lesson to the others. After one loss, when Lombardi thought Corcoran had taken bad shots, he decided to punish him by making him take physical education for the rest of the semester, a course not required of varsity athletes. 2 weeks later, he realized that he had overreacted, apologized to Corcoran, and released him from gym class. That was the method of Coach Lombardi. Corcoran learned it from his mentor and used it himself when he became a high school coach years later, then passed it along to his own disciple, a North Jersey boy named Bill Parcells, who also became a coach. Football fans would know him as a Hall of Fame coach. A couple titles with the New York Giants. Quote, "rip your butt out, then pat you on the butt. Knock you down, then build you up," said Corcoran of Lombardi's style. He understood human behavior better than any person I've ever met. Late that first season, Lombardi and his blue and gold Saints, blue and gold, same color as the Tomahawk hatchets. Ooh, I perked up on that one. Were involved in a game that secured a place in the annals of the world's strangest basketball contests. It happened on the Thursday night of February 29th, 1940, when a powerful team from the North Jersey town of Bogota visited St. Cecilia for a leap day game that meant very different things to the two teams. For the Saints, whose mediocre record precluded any chance of making the postseason tournament, a victory would enhance their late run to respectability. The mission for Bogota, at least as coach Ev Hebel perceived it, was merely to survive the game without wasting energy, preserving his boys for a tournament game later that week. His Bucks had established themselves as the superior team, having trounced the Saints earlier in the year. What followed the opening tip was an extraordinary clash of wills between Lombardi and Hebel in an era before shot clocks or rules requiring a team to advance the ball up court. 30 seconds into the game, Johnny Moon fired up a long set shot for the Saints. The ball bounced off the rim, the rebound hauled in by Henry Baum of Bogota, who immediately revealed Hebel's strategy, which was for his boys to do absolutely nothing. One arm akimbo, the other cradling the ball, Baum stood in one spot, motionless, stone-faced. Lombardi ordered his defenders to back off and wait for Bogota to go into its offense. For 7.5 minutes, Baum held the ball. Jeers and hisses hailed down from the stands. The second quarter was more of the same. The stall irritated Mickey Corcoran. He looked over at Lombardi and inched toward his man. Lombardi shook his head. Stay back, stay back. He was furious at Hebel, but determined not to give in. The shorter the game, he figured, the better chance the outmanned Saints had for pulling an upset. Saints won the tap to start the second half, and Corcoran, his fingers itchy from 16 minutes without a shot, quickly pumped one from outside. No good. Baum of Bogota had the ball again, assuming his familiar frozen posture. 19 minutes without a point. The crowd grew rowdier. Then Lombardi gave the signal, and the Saints moved up to press the ball. From then on, the game was normal basketball. The visitors had lost all energy to play, even when they were instructed to do so. They took a total of 7 shots and never scored a basket. A lone free throw prevented them from being shut out. The final score was 6-1. After the game, an eerie quiet descended on the gym as Lombardi stalked across the court. He screamed at Hebel for his tactics, even though they had backfired. It was cowardly, he said, for the better team to hold the ball and make a mockery of the game. Hebel remained calm. He said he was merely saving his team for the tournament and making a point against zone defenses, which he detested. The two men had to be separated, but parted without blows. They did not acknowledge each other for several years. At 9 o'clock one Sunday morning that spring, Palau was awakened by a pounding at the door. His roommate was not home. Just a minute, Palau said, and got up and opened the door. There stood Marie Planitz. That's Vince Lombardi's. Actually, they're engaged at this point, his fiancée. Dressed in Sunday clothes, tears streaming down her face. She and Vin had been fighting, she said, and the engagement was off. Where was he? She said that she was going across the street to attend Mass at Saints. Would Palau please help them get back together? When Lombardi returned late that afternoon, Palau told him about Marie's visit. As his roommate later described the scene, Lombardi seemed distraught, complaining that everywhere he turned, people were pressuring him to reconcile with Marie. Even his mother, who had never expressed much appreciation for the girlfriend, now seemed to be urging him to make up. He was almost 27, she pointed out, and he needed a wife, and Marie worshipped him. His younger brother Harold, studying fine arts at Fordham, had also been drawn to Marie's side. While Vince was working at Saints, Harold and Marie occasionally took outings in the city. Harold shared his brother's temper and perfectionism, but had a more artistic nature. He and Marie enjoyed sitting in the courtyard at the Plaza Hotel, sipping brandy Alexanders, talking about books and opera, American politics. They were Republicans. Vince supported Roosevelt. And the war in Europe, they thought America should keep out of it. To Harold, Marie was, quote, the greatest woman ever, and he thought his brother would be lucky to have her. Vince soon reconsidered. After another spat with Marie, he wrote a note of reconciliation and left it at her apartment. Quote, Darling Ree, it began. I love you so much, Ree. I'm sorry about last night. I'm with you 100%. Have been here since 10 this morning. Alone since 11:30 a.m. It is now about 1 o'clock. Intend to leave soon. I even brought up some buns this a.m. Thought maybe you and I could have some coffee, and sorry to have missed you. Honey, I love you with all my heart. I mean that. Sincerely, Vincent. A date was soon set for the wedding. He and Marie were married on Saturday, August 31st, 1940, at the Church of Our Lady of Refuge on East 196th Street in the Bronx. The nuptial mass was performed by the Reverend Jeremiah F. Nemechek, a Fordham football fan who idolized the 7 blocks of granite. Marie Planitz watched as her husband walked down the aisle with their daughter Marie and took a seat next to his lover, Mary's sister, Cass. The other daughter, Marge Planets, the maid of honor, was so upset with her father and Cass that she refused to acknowledge their presence. A little backstory: Vince's new bride, her dad had an affair with the with his wife's sister, their aunt. So that's why they're all still upset. And then stayed with her as well. So that's why they're upset. It's touchy. Most of the Izzo clan came up from Sheepshead Bay, filling the church with goodwill, but Mattie Lombardi seemed less than overjoyed that day. After stepping in to restore the engagement, she could barely repress her earlier attitude that no one was good enough for her son. She and other family members privately worried that Vince was marrying Marie for the wrong reasons. She was blonde and buxom, a blue-eyed Irish German, the daughter of a stockbroker, a step up the social ladder. None of that underlying tension was evident in the wedding pictures. Marie looks luxuriant in a white bridal gown with a 7-foot train that drapes the floor in a semicircle around the smiling Vince in black tails and striped tie, proudly displaying his wedding ring, which had inscriptions of the Sacred Heart and Blessed Virgin inside the band. The couple ventured to Maine for their honeymoon. Marie later confided that she was a virgin bride, and that her first night in the conjugal bed was a difficult experience for her, as was the entire adjustment to life with her new husband. He seemed preoccupied with football, even on their honeymoon, and cut it short to get back to Englewood before the first Saints practice. Quote, "I wasn't married to him 1 week," she related later, "when I said to myself, Marie Planets, you've made the greatest mistake of your life." His temper, his obsession with sports, his compulsion to tell other people what to do, the tension between his dominant public persona and his innate shyness and private anxiety, all were apparent to her from the start. But she had married Vince because he seemed solid, religious, and faithful, unlike her father. She believed, as he did, in the sacredness and lifelong commitment of marriage. She told herself that she would have to adjust. Bored and stuck in a little second-floor apartment on Grand Avenue in Englewood, she scrambled for ways to fill the ocean of hours when Vince was working with his boys. She drank coffee in Pink Ladies and played cards with the Mothers of St. Cecilia players. She walked to Palisade Avenue with Palau's new wife, Margaret, a Southern girl from North Carolina who had just had a baby and lived in the same apartment building. On the way over, she taught Margaret how to talk Northern, penny, not penny, for the coin. After they had shopped for both families at the market, Margaret carried the infant on the return trip while Marie pushed the baby carriage stocked with food. The hard part was lifting the loaded carriage up the 4 front steps. Once every few weeks, Marie rode the bus back into New York to spend the day walking around Manhattan with Vince's brother Harold. She refined her artistic skills, crocheting and creating intricate Christmas ornaments. Late on weekend nights when Vince was at last free from athletics, he took Marie out to his favorite haunts with the Palaus and other friends. They often drove up Route 9W to Englewood Cliffs for a late meal at Leo's and then some band music at the Rustic Cabin, where they fell into the habit of buying a beer and steak sandwich for a performer who came over to their table to chat after his closing set, a skinny young Italian crooner from Hoboken named Frank Sinatra. In all of those ways, the evidence suggests that Marie adjusted admirably and tried to make the most of her marriage with Lombardi. She also learned quickly how to, quote, give it back to him and make him retreat after he had yelled at her. But on a deeper level, she never adjusted. Haunted already by the trauma of her family history, by the unshakable reality that her father had run off with her aunt, she found only more heartache in her early efforts to create a family of her own. She became pregnant soon after her wedding, but at 7 months, the unborn infant died in her womb. With her doctor refusing to induce a birth, Marie carried the dead fetus inside her for several more weeks, a miserable period of prayer and mourning that she spent in bed at the Lombardi house in Brooklyn. In the aftermath of that tragedy, she began drinking heavily. Harold Lombardi, who tried to help, remembered that she was, quote, in a perpetually troubled state of mind. She seemed distressed, her sister-in-law Marie said later, quote, it had a terrible effect on her. At times, Vince was so preoccupied with teaching and coaching that he seemed unaware of his wife's troubles. He knew that she had a drinking problem, but considered it largely a matter of will and discipline. She was too weak, he told her. She either had to learn how to hold her liquor as he did or abstain from alcohol, an attitude that only led her to try to hide her drinking from him. Their relationship vacillated between hostility and adoration. They were a handsome and lively couple, their presence announced by their explosive laughter, but they snapped at each other over little things, unmindful that friends might hear them. They were chain smokers, their ashtrays overflowing with butts, and incessantly blamed each other for burn marks on their Danish modern furniture. Vince attended Mass at St. Cecilia's each morning and prayed for calm and control of his temper, of her drinking. Once in the car with his sister Madeline, a desk clerk at the Waldorf Astoria, he cried in despair about his marriage. When Marie became pregnant again, Vince's mother insisted that she return to the Lombardi house for bed rest a month before the due date. The pregnancy was difficult, but resulted in the successful birth of a son on the morning of April 27, 1942, at Prospect Heights Hospital. He was named Vincent Henry Lombardi. Vince and Marie had agreed on the first name, but she was surprised by Henry, a middle name that Vince had provided to the nurses without consulting her. Where did that come from? Vince explained that Henry, or Enrico, was his father's real name. It was traditional in Italian families for the first son to be named after the grandfather. Marie had wanted her son to be a junior, Vincent Thomas Lombardi, Jr. In any case, the arrival of the baby temporarily eased the tension in the marriage. The birth gifts included a carriage from Pop Lombardi, a crib from Gramps Planets, and a big leather football from the family doctor. Everyone said that baby Vincent was going to grow up to be a football player. Marie had a family now, more than she expected. When she and Vince and the baby drove back to Englewood on May 7th in their old blue Buick, they were joined by Harry and Mattie, who had moved out of Sheepshead Bay with little Joe and found a house on Knickerbocker Road not far from Saints and their oldest son, the football coach. Football and religion were conjoined in Saints in every manner possible. The team played on Sundays, the only time Saints could gain access to Winton J. White Stadium since Englewood Dwight Morrow High laid claim to the municipal field on Saturdays. Before every game, the preparation for battle resembled a holy rite. After the players put on their pads and uniforms, Coach Lombardi led them out from the dank basement locker room and directed them down the slope to church. Their cleats clickety-clack clicking on the sidewalk and up the marble steps as they entered the sanctuary to attend Mass and receive communion. Quote, "The few minutes that count before a game," noted the caption over a yearbook picture depicting the team on its knees, huddled in a semicircle of prayer near the front altar. At the end of pregame Mass, a cluster of nuns greeted the squad out front on Demarest and distributed sacramentals, little bleeding hearts made of red felt. Some boys stuffed the hearts inside their pants or helmets. Lombardi tucked his under the sock of his left cleat. A man of superstition, he also was careful to wear the same coat and hat to every game. The boys rode to the stadium standing in the open bed of an oil stock truck. On the way up Tenafly Road, they sang, quote, on Cecilia, fight on for your fame," to the tune of Wisconsin's familiar fight song. Local connection. Before the opening kickoff, sorry for the terrible singing, I'll work on it. Before the opening kickoff, Lombardi gathered his charges at the sideline to recite the Lord's Prayer. The bleachers were aswarm with thousands of fans, in part because the Saints were a powerhouse team, but also because in that era, when television had not penetrated the American culture and professional football was considered a minor sport, the Saints were a main source of Sunday entertainment in North Jersey. Strangers traveled by bus from towns 30 miles away to watch them play. The grandstands nudged up to the team bench, and Harry Lombardi, Vince's dad, was always right there, lighting his good luck lucky, sitting as close to his son as he could, along with his brood, which included Marie and baby Vincent. In a tradition that defined his offbeat character, old 5x5, Vince's dad, climbed the cyclone fence and sneaked into games without paying. The ushers let it pass with a shake of the head. There goes Lombardi's old man. On the ride home, the boys belted out the same raucous tune every week, "My Wild Irish Rose." And if they won, which was most of the time, the truck pulled into the half-circle driveway at the Sisters of Charity Convent. As nuns streamed onto the broad front porch and peered out second-floor windows, the squad serenaded them with the school song. St. Cecilia. I'm not gonna sing it. No, sorry. I've already had my on Wisconsin screw up. No, I'm not going to do that again. The sisters had prayed for victory. How could Saints lose? The 1942 season was Lombardi's first as head football coach. Palau had left that summer to return to Fordham to coach the Rams' backfield. This was not the same program that Handy Andy and Butch had been part of back in the mid-1930s. Sleepy Jim Crowley had left for military service after Pearl Harbor, and many on his staff and squad had followed him. Within a year, the Fordham program would close down for the remainder of the war, never to regain its previous stature. Still, Palau's leaving frustrated Lombardi even as it provided him with a new opportunity. He fretted that everyone was a rung ahead of him up the coaching ladder of success. First Nat Pierce, now Palau had made it back to the college ranks at Fordham. Johnny Drews was an assistant at Notre Dame. Leo Paquin was coaching at Xavier Prep in Manhattan. But the fact that Palau left ahead of Vince was no surprise. He'd always been one of the Fordham administration's favorites, and his record at Saints did nothing to hurt his reputation. The team lost only one game in 1940 and went undefeated in 1941. It apparently did not occur to Fordham's new coach, Earl Walsh, that the brains behind the Saints' operation was the old right guard, the forgotten block. And that's where we'll leave it for today, with Lombardi just about to embark on his head coaching career. So he's been an assistant this time. Oh, well, I guess he was a head coach for the basketball team, but I'm not sure even Vince would count that one. As always, thanks for being with us. I hope you're doing well while we're sequestered and quarantined. Again, huge thanks to all of our medical personnel who are working overtime all over not only the Northwoods, but the state and the world to keep us safe with not enough equipment to handle the jobs. So many thanks to all the folks who are putting their lives on the line to save others. And all the best to our friends in area retirement homes. We're thinking of you. Be safe, be well, be peaceful. And we'll be back with more of the life of Vince Lombardi. Thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.